Hello, everyone, and welcome to our first Dux-Soup webinar this month. We are going to discuss how to build a simple remote control monitor for Dux-Soup Turbo. And this webinar is going to be presented by Giles Garnett, Head of Professional Services. Giles will also be answering all your questions at the end of webinar, so please let me know if you have any questions via live chat. And on the live chat, we have me, Jen, the Head of Customer Support. So let's jump in. Over to you, Giles.
Thank you, Jen. Hello and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Giles Garnett, as Jen just mentioned, and I'm Head of Professional Services here at Dux-Soup. Today's topic for the webinar is centered around how to build or create a simple remote control monitor for use with Dux-Soup Turbo. Now, as many of you probably know, with the remote control functionality of Dux-Soup, you can trigger automated LinkedIn actions from any other system that you use for managing your sales and marketing activity. So, for example, you can trigger the sending of a personalized connection request to a specific profile in LinkedIn from HubSpot. So the idea of building this sort of a monitor is to enable you to check and see if the remote control commands that have been sent are being executed and completed correctly. And then the theory is that you can then monitor your activities, your remote control activities, from any device, be that a computer or a mobile. I'm not going to bore you with lots of slides this week. We're just going to have just a couple of slides just to show you here the introduction. And most of this webinar today will be a live demo. Hopefully everything will go smoothly, but it is a live demo, so you may need to bear with me from time to time. So in this webinar, we're going to show you how to create that simple monitor in Google Sheets, and we'll cover things such as understanding the different remote control events. We'll send a test example visit via Zapier, and then demonstrate how that data can be sent to a Google Sheet via another Zap. So first of all, these are the things that we're going to cover today. We'll create a Google Sheet which will populate at various times. We'll create a Zap for the remote control trigger, which is required for this demonstration. And then we'll create a Zap for the remote control monitor, which you can see how all of the data then gets populated. So if we come out of here, and one of the first things to remember is the different remote control events that we're going to be looking at. If you're familiar with the Dux-Soup support articles, you can see this particular page here shows all of the remote control events. Hopefully you can all see my screen. So we have the received event, we have the completed event, we have the snooze event, the ignore event, and the error event. And what we're going to be looking at in the context of today's demonstration are the received events here, the completed event when an activity has been successfully executed, and the error event. And that way we can then monitor what's happening within our remote control activities. So the first thing we need to do, if we are going to carry out, to build such a monitor, is we need to create a Google Sheet. In order to expedite things, I've created one already here. I've called this Dux Remote Control Monitor, and these are the columns that I've chosen to give this particular sheet. So we have the ID, and that is the unique ID that's related to the message that's been sent to the remote control. The command is, in this case, it'll be a visit command. The profile will be the URL of the profile that we're visiting. We'll be able to, using some of the built-in functionality of Zapier, we'll be able to get a timestamp as to when our remote control action was queued. And then based upon what we get back from the servers as things are completed, we'll be able to get a timestamp for the received, the completed, And also we'll be able to get information if there is an error related to that remote control activity. So we have created our spreadsheet, or our Google Sheet, I should say. And what we're going to do now is we're going to create a Zap, which will enable us to trigger a remote control action. Now, this is for demonstration purposes only. So normally the creation of a remote control command will be part of a different automation. So for example, a new customer being placed into your CRM, for example. But for the purposes of this, we're going to create a new Zap. So I'm going to go to Zapier. There are a couple of Zaps here already built in case we have problems doing this demonstration, but I'm going to make these Zaps from scratch for you. So we'll go to make a Zap. Hopefully you're all familiar with Zapier. If you're using Dux-Soup Turbo and are familiar with the layout here. First thing we're going to do is we're going to name our Zap. And for this purpose, we are going to call this remote control test visit. Always advisable to name your Zap as you build it from the first point, because otherwise you end up with a load of nameless Zaps and it's very difficult to track anything. What we're going to do is we're going to create a webhook, and as most of you will probably be familiar with, we're going to create a catch hook. But we're going to do something different with this to what we would normally do through the Dux-Soup options. What we're going to do is we're going to take this webhook URL and we're going to place that URL just into a browser window. And after that, we're going to type in !profile equals, and then we will look for a target LinkedIn profile for the remote control to visit. So in this case, I'm going to ask the robot to visit my own profile. So I'm going to copy the URL from my profile and place that here against the URL that I've just placed into this address bar. So we've taken this URL, we've given it, we've placed a query there. We're going to place it, send it off to visit my profile. So we'll press enter there, and that will load. And now we should be able to get our sample data here within the test visit. There we go. We now have a hook here, which is pointing towards my profile. So we're done with that. And now what we need to do is we need to send the Dux-Soup remote control to visit that profile. So we'll look for Dux-Soup, and we will ask Dux-Soup to visit that profile when I load that webhook. We'll choose Dux-Soup, we can visit the profile, and now I need to, as with all of these, I need to go to my Dux-Soup account, which I've already linked. Again, I assume that if you're using Dux-Soup Turbo, you will be familiar with how to link your profile into Zapier. Press continue, and now we want to customize the visit command, and we can take that from this query string here. That will identify that. I'll press continue. And that's the profile URL to visit. We're going to press test and review. And there we are. A test visit command was sent to Dux-Soup. What we should see is an activity actually occur. But the important thing is we've got here this message ID. The message ID is what we need in order, that will be our unique identifier later on in our spreadsheet. So if we look back here at our spreadsheet, this is the ID here, the message ID that we were talking about. So now we've done that, and what we want to do is we would like to populate a spreadsheet row, our Google Sheet row, with that data. So we'll go to Google Sheets, and what we would like to do here is create a new spreadsheet row based upon that message ID. We'll press continue. Once again, we need to go to our Google Sheet account, continue. We'll go to the spreadsheet that I've created, which is the Dux-RC monitor. It'll be the first worksheet because I've only created one. And what we have here are the fields reflected from our Google Sheet. Our unique identifier is our ID. So our ID, our message ID, comes from this visit, and that's the message ID in this field here. We can also then pick out the URL that we visited. We can go to the profile, and we can go to the catch hook. If you remember rightly, the catch hook here was pointing towards my LinkedIn profile, so we can take that dynamically. And then what we can do here is we can add a timestamp using some of the built-in functionality of Zapier. If I just very quickly show you here, this is one of the functions of the built-in functions of Zapier. We can use these fields in order to put timestamps based upon various criteria. We go back to our Zap, and in this case, what I would like to do is I would like to capture Zap underscore meta UTC, and then we close that two brackets. And that is generated at the moment, that's a timestamp generated at the moment that the Zap runs. So now I can press continue. And we can now send a test row to my Google Sheet and see if that works. Send a test. That's been sent. We'll now go back to our Google Sheet. And we can see here, this is the message ID appearing. We've got the profile, and we've got the timestamp as to when this was queued. Be aware that that timestamp is linked to the timestamp, the time settings that you have against your Zapier profile. So whatever time zone you have set up in Zapier, that will determine. There are other configurations which you can look at in this article, but by default, it's set to the time that your Zapier account is set up in. So there we are. We've now got our base data there from carrying out a test remote control visit. So what we can do now is we are done with this particular Zap, and we can turn that Zap on. Hopefully, there we go. So that one is on. So that's the first step. We've now created an automated action for us to be able to generate a remote control triggered visit. Now what we need to do is build the second Zap, and this would be the more standard Zap, where you can capture where the various activities happen in the remote control flow. So once again, we are going to make a Zap. And this time we're going to do this in the more familiar way that you are with using Dux-Soup. We're going to create a webhook by Zapier. First of all, we should name it. So we'll call this RC monitor. And the trigger event is also going to be a catch hook. And this time we're going to place that catch hook into our Dux-Soup options. We're going to turn on the webhook. We're going to place the URL into the webhook functionality, and this is a remote control activity. I'm now going to turn on the remote control functionality as well, so that we're able to receive those messages. Again, if you're familiar with Turbo, then that's something you'll be familiar with already. And now we'll go back to here. Now, what I want to do now is I actually want to generate some sample data, as again you'll be familiar with, but I actually want to trigger an error in my activity here so that we can then populate as much of the information as possible in one go. If I don't get an error, then I will have limited data to be able to work from. So I want to populate as many fields as possible in our initial trial. So I'm going to press continue here, and now it's going to ask for some sample data. And what I will do, I think it's just carried out an auto visit. It has, and that didn't generate an error because it went faster than I was expecting. So what I'm going to do is I'm now going to reload this one. You'll see a new page open visiting my profile, but in order to trigger an error, I will close it before it's loaded. So let's reload that one. And at the moment that we see, so we can see that's been sent, that's been queued, that particular command. In a moment, we will see the URL open, and I'm going to close that straight away. And as I say, in a moment or two, we should see some more sample hooks appear here, where we'll hopefully get an error. If we look at these ones at the moment, from that first one, we have the event type here, snooze. We have the event completed, and here we have the received. So we've got those three already, but actually what we want now is hopefully an error. We've got the received one from that last visit that we just carried out. This sometimes takes a minute or two in order for the timeout to occur, so bear with me. But what we can see here is we can see here the message IDs being reflected here in the data that's coming through. So 13F8 from that last one. We can see that that's already been populated here in our spreadsheet from the first Zap that we built. Okay. Just wait for the error to come through. As I say, this sometimes takes a minute or two to happen. So we've got, here we go. So this is again 13F8, and this is where the event error has occurred. That's great, because we can now use that particular hook to help us go further with this particular Zap. Okay, so our next activity that we want to do is we would like to add some filters in here. What we need to do here is we need to set up filters because we have three different scenarios. And that's the three scenarios based upon the different events that could occur. So here we'll have three separate OR filters, and that's where we want the event to exactly match the three different scenarios. So we can have, excuse my typing, we can have an error, we can have received, and we can have completed. And those are the three scenarios that we can get under the events. Those are the messages that we're interested in for this particular scenario. So here we've set that up, we've checked that. The Zap would have continued because we know we had an error event on this particular one. Okay, so we're done editing with that. Now, for this next section, there are multiple different ways that you could do this, this next particular part, and this is so that we can actually populate multiple fields at the same time. And through some testing that we have done, we're actually going to do this through use of a little bit of Java. So we're going to use the inbuilt coding functionality that sits within Zapier, and we, as I say, we want to look at three different particular scenarios here. So we actually, for this particular section, we want to be looking at the event. We also want to be able to look at the timestamp, and then we also want to look at the error, if there is one. And we take all of this data from the catch hook. So the event, we take the timestamp from the time field, and then if there's an error, we take that from the data error. And now because of time, I won't go into the detail of this. This is all documented on the blog that was posted earlier today. We will now place a little bit of Java code in here, which helps us to make this Zap as efficient as possible. And we'll see what all this does shortly as we go through the various, as we go through populating our Google Sheet. So I won't go into that in detail at the moment. So now we're going to custom run our JavaScript. And there we go. That was run there. So now we've carried out, we've basically captured a load of data from the activities that are being carried out by the remote control. And what we now need to do is further populate our Google Sheet. So in order to do that, the first thing we need to do is again go back to our Google Sheet. Somewhat long-winded this, I know, but following this through step by step, it does, when you see the result at the end, it does make logical sense. What we're going to do first of all is we're going to carry out a lookup on the Google Sheet to make sure the Google Sheet, the row actually exists. So again, I need to go to my my Google account and point us towards the correct sheet. And again, we're going to the Dux-RC monitor, worksheet number 1. And now we need to look to define our lookup column. And our lookup column will be the data ID. That will be our unique identifier. And we need to compare that lookup value here. And that comes from the initial webhook and this data ID here. So we can now look up against that. Now there may be a scenario whereby that doesn't exist in your spreadsheet. So what we will ask it to do is, if that doesn't exist, we will ask the Google Sheet, if it doesn't exist, to create a new spreadsheet row. And from that we can then once again go to catch hook. We can define the data ID. We can now also then define the actual command. So the data command is here. And also we can then pick out the URL of the profile we've chosen to visit. In this case, it's my profile. So that's populating the Google Sheet if it didn't exist, if that particular row didn't exist. So we'll again press test and review. Now, because that row already existed, it won't add another row in there. And our final step now will be to once again, using Google Sheets, what we will do now is we will ask this spreadsheet row to be updated with the data that's been gathered from the various steps that we've carried out beforehand. Once again, we need to log on to the correct, make sure it's connected to the correct Google account and find the spreadsheet. Dux-RC monitor, sheet 1. And then we need to here have the search step where we'll use the custom value. The custom value comes from looking in the Google Sheet, and that's from the ID that we are looking at. And what we want to do here now is we can populate some more of the data here. So we'll put in the data command, which in this case is the visit command. And now we'll already have had the profile, we'll already have the queued data from the original Zap that we built. And now it's these three fields here that we wish to populate. And this information could come from, we need to check where that's coming from. So we can here check the received in the Google Sheet, the completed from Google Sheet, and also the error. But then we can also add in here from our running from the JavaScript activity. So again, here we can take the received data from there, the completed data, which is a timestamp, and also if there was an error and what that output was. So what we've done there is we've now populated, hopefully, everything into our Google spreadsheet. We'll press test and review. And we'll see here that a test spreadsheet row was sent to Google Sheets. When we go back up to our Google Sheet, and we can see here from that initial test that we sent at the very start of the second Zap, that we actually did achieve a timeout. So now what we can do is we can run the whole activity. What we need to do first is turn on the Zap. We'll go back out. So we can see here we have these two Zaps activated here, the test visit and then the monitor. So that will be, both of those will be populating our Dux remote control monitor here. And what we can do now is, in order to prove this, and we're going to visit a different profile in LinkedIn. So rather than visiting my profile with the remote control, we're now going to visit a different profile by updating that URL. We'll press enter. And what we should see now is this spreadsheet automatically populating. So you can see here, it's just opened the profile. You can see that the message was queued at this time. It was received in the system at this time. This is the URL that it's visiting. That's the command, it's a visit command. And shortly, we will see up here, we will see the Dux-Soup will automatically close that profile. And we should then see a completed timestamp here when that activity is completed. And in the meantime, for a little bit more completeness, we will look up a further URL and get some more data. Again, putting the URL profile in there, and we can now see that first one that we carried out there, the queued timestamp, the received timestamp, and the completed timestamp. And then for the last one there that I've just done, it's now carrying out as well, opening up the profile and compiling the data into our Google Sheet. Now, you could also take this a step further. You can prove here that all of this data comes through. So it's the commonality between all of this data here is this data ID. This is the unique identifier for each of these messages that are going through the remote control. What you may want to do is you may want to also be able to make this visible in other devices. You could put custom formatting onto this this Google Sheet. You could put a kind of dashboard together. You could, using what's built into Google Docs, you could then render your particular spreadsheet according to whatever device you happen to be using. So we can mimic, for example, a smartphone screen in this way here by activating the various options in Google Documents, and you can then refine your spreadsheet or your monitor, so you can then color code everything depending on the scenarios that are occurring for you. So that's really what I wanted to demonstrate today, was how to create this monitor. It's a fairly complex activity, quite a lot of steps involved. But if you go to the Dux-Soup blog page, you will see this particular page here that's been updated today, building a simple remote control monitor for Dux-Soup Turbo. All of the steps that I've been through in this webinar are clearly outlined here. Step-by-step tutorial. Hopefully what I've been able to show you here has shown you that it's not too complicated. There's a few steps in there. All of the information regarding the JavaScript is in this document as well. So hopefully by sharing this information with you and taking it through step by step to show how to get this to work properly will enable you to be able to build this monitor in a relatively straightforward way. Okay, I think that's everything I was going to cover. If we head back to the slides. Jin, were there any questions coming up on the chat while I was going through the various steps of building the monitor?
Thank you. Yeah, we have not a lot of questions actually. So let's start off with Matt. He was asking, do I need to send information to Google Sheets before the CRM? Preferably, I only want to send those who respond to CRM, if that's possible.
Sorry, can you repeat that, Jin? Sorry.
Do I need to send information to Google Sheets before the CRM? Preferably, I only want to send those who respond to my CRM.
Yeah, if you're only interested in those who've responded to your message, then that would be a separate filter. So you would have them I would imagine you would check to make sure that certain follow-up messages or tags have been applied before you then go down the further route of having them then inserted into your Google Sheet. Or you could add a filter within your Google Sheet so that those who don't have certain tags against them, the responded tag, for instance, then you could use that as an extra filter. Yeah, there's various different ways of doing that. But yeah, if you need further help with that, then I'm sure that's something that we can provide through support. But yeah, it just seems like there would be an extra step and an extra filter there. It would make no difference as to whether you wanted them to just the ones that had responded or vice versa.
Thank you. Another question: can this trigger? Can this trigger the sending of a personalized connection request to a specific profile in LinkedIn from HubSpot?
Again, can you repeat that, Jin? Sorry, I didn't quite
Sorry. Can this trigger the sending of personalized connection request to a specific profile in LinkedIn from HubSpot? So this being, can remote control trigger sending personalized connection request from HubSpot?
The remote control, you can use the remote control for carrying out, let's have a look. So if we look at the different types of events that we can carry out, so we would be carrying out the received, the completed, so there are all sorts of different commands that we can have the remote control do. In this case, we're using the visit command. Let's have a look. So yeah, we have these various different things. We can have the visit command, the connect command, the message, and the wait command can all be done via the remote control. So yeah, you can build what you like, really, dependent on whether they fit within those commands. Again, it'd be probably worth going through the scenario individually with you through a support call, perhaps, in order to do that. But theoretically, yes.
Thank you. I think that was the last question I got.
Okay.
So I think we could, if no one has any more questions, I think we could finish the webinar.
Okay, just to let people know as well, I'm currently running all of the booster calls and the technical calls, which you can book through the Dux-Soup website. And in 2 weeks' time, I believe the topic for the next webinar is sort of going back to basics with lead generation and Dux-Soup, how to get new starters up and running with Dux-Soup. So going over some of the fundamentals of lead generation and using Dux-Soup in conjunction with LinkedIn, and that's what we'll be covering on the next webinar.
Thank you.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Thank you, everybody, and see you in 2 weeks' time.
Bye.